Hi and welcome to the Fishhead Creations podcast, where I pull out one of my interesting knitting projects every time and talk through the details. My name is Emma and I'm very happy to be back here with you. I'm boiling, I'm melting. I have closed the windows because my neighbors keep being ridiculous and outside. It's hot. It's gotten even hotter since last week, and it is overcast, so at least no direct sunlight, but it's still hot. It's boiling hot. But I didn't really want to skip recording because I just want to keep the habit, and I might have to skip next week because we're having guests. But yeah, this week I thought I'd actually talk about a recently finished object, because when it's 30 degrees outside and you're boiling and melting by just sitting around and doing nothing, what's the most logical thing to knit? Exactly. Heavyweight winter sweater, jumper, whatever. From the top here you can see it's the traditional Marius pattern, published by the Norwegian company Sandnes, but originally designed by Unseland Dale. And I also knitted in Sandnes yarn, so it's the Per Gint line, which is a DK worsted weight, 100% Norwegian wool. And the pattern calls for a gauge of 22 stitches. So I went with 3.5mm needles. I tend to approximately get 22 stitches with that needle size, so I just went for it. And it fits fine, so apparently I've been at least close to gauge. But I must say, for such a heavyweight yarn, and you can see how dense it is. If I put my hand inside, there's no way you can see my hand through it. So it's an extremely dense and warm sweater, but that meant it was extremely tight and hard to move around the needles, which led to me breaking 2 needles while knitting this. Whereas before that I had never broken any needles at all in 2 years of knitting. So yeah, it's not a gauge I'd like to knit again. It also put a lot of strain on my neck and shoulders, which tend to hurt a lot, and they've become worse since knitting it, so I'm quite glad to have it finished. But it's been a long-standing whip. I cast this on in the middle of May, and I don't usually take any longer than 4 weeks to knit a jumper. And the reason for it is this. I had a limited amount of this yarn because it was payment for a few sample knits I did earlier in the year in April. And I just went by the yarn requirements given in the pattern and just added a little of the main color. But apparently my short row gauge defeated me again, as it does so often, and I ran out of the yarn when I had finished the sleeves and the body. So this is knitted bottom up, and I started with both sleeves up to here, then knit the body up to here, and then joined them all on one needle and had no yarn of the main color left. So I just put it aside and did different things and didn't think about it, because I couldn't decide if I wanted to buy more of the yarn, or if I could figure out something else, or if I was just going to hope I might do some more sample knits that ask for more yarn and payment. But in the end I just decided I'd rip out the body from the bottom to get enough of the main color yarn to knit the yoke as it's supposed to be, and then just finish off in red, because I knew I had quite a bit more red than I needed for the body. Because originally you only need the red for this little bit at the top, and I had 3.5 skeins or balls, so I decided I'd have more than enough of the red yarn to finish the body again, and I'd just go for it and see how it looked and how I liked it. So that's what I did. As this is knit bottom up, it was my first time ripping out from the cast on edge. What I ended up doing was just finding a place where I joined a new skein on the inside, untie that knot, because I hadn't woven in any ends obviously, and pull out the yarn from there. So where was I? Well, I had detached the ribbing from the rest of the sweater by ripping out this one row of knitting where I had joined a skein, and then I could just unravel that part from the top, which was quite easy, but then I had to go further and unravel from the bottom. And well, that was quite straightforward most of the time, but when I had the decreases, because I had waist shaping in here, it meant that unraveling from the bottom, the yarn was going through the stitches on the next row. So I had to break the yarn there and then just split splice it back together, which I didn't realize I could do until halfway through the yoke, when I had already produced about 10 ends to weave in for me. But that's fine. I don't actually really mind weaving in ends. It's not the most fun activity or not the most fun part of knitting, but it's not horrible either. And so I was quite fine with that. Then, well, yeah, I finished the top. I rejoined my yarn. I did a bit of color work, just 2 rows to mimic the transition at the top. And then reknitted in red, increasing where I had decreased before when I was knitting bottom up, just to get the waist shaping you can see here, I hope. And then, well, the yoke and the sleeves I just knit to pattern. I didn't modify anything there, except for the fact that I added a few short rows here. As you can see, the neck comes quite a bit higher than the front, and here it's only a little bit of red, but if you look at the back, there's quite a bit more. So I threw in, I think, 3 sets of short rows, and I also decreased further down than the pattern called for, because those big company Norwegian sweaters are quite notorious for too wide necklines, and I wanted it very snug and warm because it's such a warm, dense sweater, and I didn't want a gaping neckline that would sit outside on my shoulders. But I actually did it a bit too far, or at least I bound off a bit too tightly, because I can put it on and I can take it off, but it's quite hard. It gets stuck on my nose and my ears. But yeah, that's fine. And if it does bother me when I can finally wear it because it finally cools down again, if it bothers me too much, then I just go back and rip out the bind off and redo it in a more stretchy way. So far I just bound off in pattern, so in 1x1 ribbing, but you can see it's not that stretchy. It's quite a firm edge. I think the bottom is very, very bold, and it looks almost too much when you're just looking at the sweater like this. But I tried it on for about 10 seconds and then I had to rip it off because it was just too warm. And when I'm wearing it, it actually looks fine, because this red part starts just below the waist, so it emphasizes the narrower part of the garment where it comes in at the waist, and therefore it actually looks quite flattering when I'm wearing it, although it is extremely bold when you just look at it like this. The only good thing about the weather is I washed this jumper yesterday and put it up in the attic to dry, and it's bone dry now, and I assume it was already yesterday evening, or earlier even, because it's just so unbearably hot. I also did have quite a bit of the light grey left over, and after I'd finished I was thinking that maybe it would have looked better if I had just done the bottom the light grey, except instead of the bold red. But I don't think it would have been enough, because it took just over 2 balls of the red to finish this, and I had just broken into my second ball of the grey for the yoke, so I would have had to shorten it, and I actually quite like the size and the length of it. It covers my hips, and it just covers everything I want to keep warm in winter when I'm wearing such a heavyweight garment. So overall I'm quite happy to have this finished finally after 2.5 months, which is not a time it usually takes me to knit something in this type of yarn. For a fingering weight jumper I don't usually need more than a month to knit it, and this is, well, somewhere between DK and worsted, I'd say. It knits up more like a worsted weight, and it's really, really heavy and dense. I think this whole jumper almost weighs 1 kilo, so, well, I think about 800 grams or something. I didn't weigh it, but it's heavy, it's dense, it's very, very warm, and yeah, I'm quite happy with it. So I think that's it for today again. I really want to reopen my windows to at least have a bit of wind inside, and the cats have melted already too. They've been just flopping on their sides and not moving for weeks, as you will see. Thank you very, very much for watching. You can find me as always at Caledoniana on Instagram and as Obstia Reverie, which I put in the down bar below. And I'd love to hear from you. Bye! Yes, that's my computer. The cats have turned liquid.